The winter air bit through Andrew's thin jacket as he walked home from school, his backpack heavy with books he borrowed from the library. At just 14, he already stood out in his Detroit neighborhood, not because of his height or looks, but because of where people usually found him. Hunched over a computer in the community center, or with his nose in a science book. Growing up in the east side of Detroit wasn't easy. The factories that once brought life and money to the neighborhood were mostly gone now, leaving behind empty buildings with broken windows that stared like hollow eyes at the streets below. Andrew's dad, Leon, still worked at one of the few factories left, coming home each night with hands rough from labor and clothes that smelled of metal and oil. His mom, Denise, worked night shifts as a nurse at the county hospital, her eyes always tired but her smile never fading when she saw her son. "That boy's going somewhere," neighbors would say when Andrew passed by. Even as a kid, there was something different about him, a quiet determination, a way of looking at problems like they were puzzles waiting to be solved. Their apartment was small, just enough room for the three of them. The kitchen table doubled as Andrew's desk, where he'd spread out his homework each night after dinner. It was at that same table that his father would sometimes sit after a 12-hour shift and tell stories about how the factory used to make car parts that would travel all across America. "Everything connects," Leon would say, tracing the routes on an old road atlas. "What we make here ends up everywhere." Andrew never forgot those words. The local high school wasn't known for its academics. Textbooks were outdated, computers were scarce, and some teachers had already given up. But Mr. Powell, the science teacher, noticed Andrew's talent early on. He stayed late after school, letting Andrew use the one decent computer in the lab, teaching him programming basics on an old system most kids ignored. "You've got a gift," Mr. Powell told him one afternoon. "But gifts aren't enough in this world. You need to work twice as hard, be twice as good." Andrew took those words to heart. While his friends played basketball or hung out at the corner store, he was coding, reading, learning. By 16, he built a small program that helped his mother track her shifts and sleep schedule, making her hectic life a little easier. When the MIT scholarship letter arrived in their mailbox, Denise screamed so loud the whole floor of their apartment building came running. Leon, a man of few words, just held the letter in his calloused hands, nodding slowly, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. College was a different world. The buildings were massive, the resources endless, and for the first time, Andrew felt the weight of being different. He was one of only a handful of black students in the computer science program, and one of even fewer from a neighborhood like his. Some professors seemed surprised when he spoke up in class, as if they hadn't expected insight from someone with his background. But Andrew had been prepared for this his whole life. When classmates stayed up all night struggling with coding problems, he saw the ghosts of all those late nights at the community center. When they complained about the workload, he remembered his father coming home after 12 hours on his feet, still making time to help with homework. He graduated with honors, his parents watching from the audience, both taking rare days off work to see their son in his cap and gown. The photographs from that day, Denise in her best dress, Leon in his only suit, still sat on Andrew's desk years later, even when that desk was in the corner office of a glass and steel tower in Silicon Valley. After college came jobs at big tech companies, where Andrew learned the business side of technology. He saved every penny, lived in a tiny apartment, and watched how the industry worked. At 29, using his savings and a small loan, he founded Ecotech Solutions with a focus on affordable solar energy. The first few years were brutal long days, sleepless nights, and constant rejection from investors who couldn't quite see his vision. Or perhaps, though Andrew never said it aloud, couldn't quite see past the face presenting it. But slowly, surely, things began to change. A breakthrough in solar panel efficiency. A major contract with the city government. Positive press coverage that highlighted not just the technology but the man behind it. 8 years after starting with just 3 employees in a rented office space, Ecotech Solutions employed over 2,000 people, had offices in 4 countries, and was valued at more than $3 billion. Andrew, the boy from East Detroit, had become one of the few black CEOs of a Fortune 500 company in America. But success hadn't changed certain things. He still called his parents every Sunday. He still kept their picture on his desk. and he still remembered what his father had told him about connections, how something made in one place could end up changing lives everywhere else. Andrew was in the middle of a meeting when his assistant, Tanya, slipped him a note. He glanced down at her neat handwriting. "American Morning wants you on the show. Call back ASAP." He tucked the note into his pocket and continued the meeting, discussing Ecotech's latest solar panel design with his engineering team. Only after everyone had filed out did he sink back into his chair and pull out the note again. American Morning was no small deal. It was the country's most watched morning show, beaming into millions of homes every weekday. People built careers off a good appearance on that show. They'd also ruined them with bad ones. Andrew picked up his phone and called Tanya. "Get me Philip from PR," he said. 10 minutes later, Philip knocked on his office door, already looking excited. "You got the call from American Morning?" Philip asked, not bothering with hello. He was young, energetic, and the best PR director Andrew had ever worked with. "Just heard about it. What do you think?" Philip dropped into a chair across from Andrew's desk. "I think it's exactly what we need before the solar home launch. 8 minutes on national TV explaining how our tech can cut the average family's energy bill by 60%. We couldn't pay for that kind of publicity." Andrew nodded slowly. Ecotech was just weeks away from launching Solar Home, their most ambitious project yet, affordable solar technology designed specifically for middle and lower income households. It wasn't just about business. It was the reason he had started the company. Growing up, he'd watched his parents struggle with rising energy costs, sometimes choosing between keeping the heat on or buying groceries. Solar Home could change that reality for millions of families. "Who's hosting?" Andrew asked, tapping his pen against the desk. "Greg Williams usually does the tech segments, but they said it would be with Cameron Pierce." Andrew's tapping stopped. Cameron Pierce was the newest host on American Morning and already notorious for his confrontational interview style. He'd made a tech founder cry just last month by grilling her about privacy concerns. "Why Pierce? We're not controversial." Philip shrugged. "They said he specifically requested you. Apparently, he saw your Business Weekly cover and was intrigued by your story." Their words, not mine. The Business Weekly cover had been a milestone. Andrew standing in front of Ecotech headquarters, arms crossed, with the headline "Changing the Energy Game." The article had focused on both the company's innovations and Andrew's unlikely path from Detroit to running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It was good press, but it had also brought more attention to him personally than he typically preferred. "What's your gut telling you?" Andrew asked. Philip leaned forward. "My gut says it's a risk, but a calculated one. Pierce can be tough, but he's not unfair. And right now, with the launch so close, we need all eyes on Ecotech." Andrew walked to the window of his office, looking out at the sprawling campus Ecotech had built just outside of Oakland. Solar panels covered every roof, a physical reminder of their mission. In the distance, he could see the community center they'd funded, where kids from nearby neighborhoods learned coding and engineering after school. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother. "Proud of you, baby. Dad would be too." Leon had passed away 2 years earlier, never getting to see just how far Ecotech would go. But he'd lived long enough to see his son's dream take shape, to move into the comfortable house Andrew had bought them, to finally retire from the factory that had worn his body down over 40 years. Andrew made his decision. "Tell them yes," he told Philip. "But make sure they understand we're there to talk about Solar Home. This isn't a profile piece on me." Philip nodded, already typing on his tablet. "I'll set the parameters." "They're talking about next Tuesday. That works with your schedule. Make it happen." After Philip left, Andrew sat at his desk and pulled up the Ecotech website. The countdown clock for the Solar Home launch ticked steadily on the homepage. 24 days, 7 hours, 36 minutes. Over the next week, Andrew's team prepared him rigorously for the interview. They ran mock sessions with Philip playing an especially aggressive version of Cameron Pierce, throwing out difficult questions about everything from supply chains to rare earth minerals to competitors' claims. "Remember," Tanya said as they finished the final prep session, "you know this subject better than anyone. You've lived and breathed affordable energy solutions for 8 years." Andrew nodded, grateful for his team's confidence. The night before the interview, he called his mother. "You watching tomorrow?" he asked. "Got the whole nursing home scheduled to tune in." Denise laughed. "Mrs. Jenkins down the hall used to watch you ride your bike when I was at work. Now she's going to see you on American Morning. Life is something, isn't it?" "It sure is, Mom," Andrew said, smiling despite the nerves building in his stomach. "It sure is." As his driver pulled up to the studio the next morning, Andrew straightened his tie and took a deep breath. The show's producer met him at the entrance, clipboard in hand, all smiles and firm handshakes. "Mr. P.S. is really looking forward to this," she said as she led him through the maze of corridors. "He rarely requests specific guests." Andrew just nodded, keeping his expression neutral. Something about that didn't sit right with him, but it was too late to worry about it now. In less than an hour, he'd be live in front of millions of viewers, representing not just himself or Ecotech, but all the people who needed what they were building. 2 minutes. A stagehand called as Andrew was settled into a chair opposite Cameron P.S.'s empty seat. The bright studio lights felt hot on Andrew's face as he adjusted himself in the chair. Across from him, Cameron P.S. flashed a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The makeup artist gave Andrew one final touch-up, then scurried away as the floor director counted down. 5, 4, 3. The last two numbers were silent, just fingers in the air. "Welcome back to American Morning," Cameron said smoothly to the camera. "Today we're joined by one of America's most surprising success stories." There was the smallest pause before the word surprising. So brief most viewers might miss it, but Andrew caught it immediately. Andrew Wilson is the founder and CEO of Ecotech Solutions, currently valued at over $3 billion. Cameron turned to face Andrew directly. "Thanks for joining us this morning." "Happy to be here," Andrew replied with the warm, confident smile he practiced. "Especially with our solar home launch just 3 weeks away." "Yes, your new product," Cameron nodded, glancing down at his notes. "We'll get to that. But first, I'm curious about your journey. You grew up in Detroit, public schools, working-class family. Now you're one of the few black CEOs of a Fortune 500 company. That's quite a leap." Andrew nodded, still smiling. "It's been an incredible journey. I was fortunate to have supportive parents who—" "Let me ask you directly," Cameron cut in, leaning forward. "There's been a big push for diversity in tech over the last decade. Did that play a role in your rise?" The question hung in the air. Behind the cameras, Andrew saw Philip stiffen. This wasn't what they'd agreed to discuss. "My company's success is based on innovation and addressing real needs in the market," Andrew answered evenly. "Our focus on affordable clean energy solutions." "But surely," Cameron interrupted again, "you must acknowledge that being a minority business owner opens certain doors? Government contracts with diversity requirements, special funding opportunities." Andrew felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd had in college when a professor suggested he might be there because of affirmative action, not merit. He took a slow breath. "Ecotech won its contracts by offering superior products at competitive prices," he said. "Our early investors backed us because our technology works. I'd be happy to explain how our new solar home system—" Cameron waved his hand dismissively. "Your company has been praised for its diverse hiring practices. Some critics suggest this approach prioritizes identity over qualifications. How do you respond?" The studio seemed to grow quieter. The camera operators exchanged glances. This was not the tech segment they were expecting. "We hire the best people for each role," Andrew said, his voice still calm but firmer now. "Our team's diversity is a strength that brings different perspectives to problem solving. That's just good business." "Interesting perspective," Cameron said with that same, not quite genuine smile. "Let's look at your background a bit more. You attended MIT on scholarship. Was that a minority scholarship program?" Andrew felt a flash of heat rise up his neck. Not anger exactly. He'd dealt with questions like this his entire career, but a deep wariness. He glanced at his watch, realizing they were 3 minutes into the segment and hadn't mentioned a single thing about solar home or affordable energy. "My scholarship was merit-based," he answered, then deliberately added, "like our technology. Our new system can reduce household energy costs by up to 60%, which could make a real difference for working families like the one I grew up in." Cameron's smile tightened slightly at the redirect. Yes, we'll touch on that. But I'm trying to understand how someone with your background managed to achieve so much so quickly in such a competitive field. There it was again, that slight pause, the careful emphasis on background that could mean so many things. Andrew noticed a production assistant behind the camera wince. Even the floor director looked uncomfortable now. In his earpiece, Andrew could hear the voice of the show's executive producer. Wrap it up, Cam. Move to the product. But Cameron pressed on, speaking over Andrew's measured response about market opportunities. Some would say you've had advantages others haven't. What would you say to those critics? The studio fell silent. The cameras seemed to zoom in closer. This was the moment where interviews often went off the rails, where guests stormed off or lost their temper, creating the kind of viral moment that drove ratings but destroyed reputations. Andrew set down the water glass he'd been holding. He could feel every eye in the studio on him, waiting for his response. The earpiece crackled again, 30 seconds to commercial. He looked directly at Cameron, took a deep breath, and made a decision. The studio lights seemed to grow even hotter as Andrew set down his water glass. Everyone was waiting for his response, the crew, the producers watching from the control room, and millions of viewers at home. Most expected anger. Some might have even wanted it. An angry black man on morning television would certainly make headlines. But there was something else in Andrew's eyes, not rage, but a calm clarity that came from having faced moments like this many times before. He straightened slightly in his chair and looked directly at Cameron. "I'd like to address what you're really asking, Cameron," he said, his voice steady and clear. Cameron blinked, caught off guard by Andrew's composed tone. He'd been expecting defensiveness or outrage, reactions that would have made for juicy television clips. Instead, the CEO across from him seemed almost serene. In the control room, the producer who had been about to cut to commercial paused, finger hovering over the button. "Wait," she said to her team. "Let's see where this goes." Andrew's mind raced through his options. He could walk off the set. He had every right to. He could call out Cameron's thinly veiled racism, which would feel satisfying but likely feed into the exact narrative the host was trying to create. Or he could do something unexpected. He smiled, not the practiced media smile he'd been wearing, but a genuine one that softened his face and caught Cameron off guard. "Let me tell you about my mother," Andrew said. The cameraman who had been focused on Cameron swung back to Andrew, sensing a shift in the conversation's energy. "My mother," Andrew continued, "worked as a nurse for 37 years. Night shifts mostly, because they paid a little better, though it meant she slept while most people were awake. When I was 10, my father hurt his back at the factory where he worked. The doctors said he wouldn't be able to do physical labor again." Cameron shifted in his seat, uncertain where this was going and whether to interrupt. "For almost a year, my mom worked double shifts, 16 hours straight sometimes, to keep our family afloat. She'd come home so tired she could barely stand, but she'd still check my homework before collapsing into bed." The studio had fallen completely silent. Even the usually restless camera operators stood perfectly still, transfixed. One night, I asked her why she worked so hard, why she didn't just give up when things got tough. Know what she told me? Andrew leaned forward slightly. She said, "Nobody can stop you but you. The world will put plenty of barriers in your way. Your job isn't to complain about them, it's to climb over them." Andrew paused, letting the words hang in the air. In the control room, the producer whispered, "Don't cut. Don't you dare cut." "When I was in high school," Andrew continued, "my mom somehow found time to volunteer at my school. The building was falling apart, the textbooks were outdated, and some teachers had already given up. But she organized other parents, cornered the principal during her break at the hospital, still in her scrubs, and demanded better for us kids." Cameron glanced nervously at his notes, realizing he had completely lost control of the interview. "She taught me that excellence isn't optional, it's necessary. That you don't just work hard to prove people wrong. You work hard because it's who you are. That's the foundation Ecotech is built on." Andrew reached for his water glass again, taking a small sip before setting it down. "You asked about my background, Cameron. That's my background. A mother who never made excuses and never let me make them either. A father who taught me integrity matters more than applause. A community that showed me what resilience looks like. He gestured toward the screen behind them, which showed the Ecotech logo. The same values guide our company today. We hire the best people, period. We create technology that works, period. And we're focused on making clean energy affordable for families like the one I grew up in, families that have to choose between keeping the lights on and putting food on the table. The red light on the camera was still glowing. They had gone well past the time for a commercial break, but nobody moved to cut away. Andrew's words had created a gravity all their own. So to directly answer your question about critics who might question my success or my company's success, Andrew said, his voice quiet but firm, I'd say this: judge us by our results. Our solar technology works, it saves money, it helps the environment, and it's going to change lives. He smiled again, that same genuine smile. That's what matters, doesn't it? Cameron's face had transformed during Andrew's response. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like respect, or perhaps shame. The host opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, for once at a loss for words. In homes across America, millions of viewers leaned closer to their screens, captivated by what they were witnessing. Not an angry confrontation, but something far more powerful. For the next 4 minutes, Andrew spoke without interruption. It wasn't just that Cameron had been stunned into silence, it was that everyone in the studio sensed they were witnessing something rare and genuine. You know, Andrew continued, his voice warm but firm, my mother used to say something else that's always stayed with me. She'd say, how you respond to difficulty shows more about your character than how you handle success. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving Cameron's face. When I started Ecotech, we got turned down by 43 investors. 43. Some were polite about it. Others weren't. One guy looked at our business plan, looked at me and said, maybe you should aim a little lower. I thanked him for his time and moved on to investor number 44. A small smile crossed Andrew's face at the memory. Investor 44 was a woman who'd built her own company from nothing. She didn't care what I looked like or where I came from. She cared about our technology and our vision for making clean energy accessible to everyone. She gave us our first real chance. The red light on camera 2 was still on. In the control room, the producer had made a decision. They weren't cutting away from this. Not now. That's how life works sometimes, Andrew said. You face closed door after closed door, and all you can do is keep knocking until the right one opens. My mom taught me that perseverance isn't just about working hard, it's about maintaining your dignity and integrity while you do it. He gestured toward the screen behind them, which now showed images of Ecotech's solar panels on the roofs of modest homes. That's why our company focuses on affordable energy solutions, because I remember my parents sitting at our kitchen table trying to figure out which bills they could pay that month and which would have to wait. I remember winter nights when we kept the heat low to save money, all of us wearing extra layers inside our own apartment. Cameron, who had been listening intently, finally found his voice. That's admirable, he said, his typical confidence noticeably diminished. But Andrew wasn't finished. He smoothly pivoted from his personal story to the company's mission, connecting them in a way that felt natural and compelling. When we designed our solar home system, we had one goal: make it affordable enough that a family like mine could have used it. Not just wealthy homeowners looking to go green, but working people who need to cut their monthly expenses. Andrew pulled out his phone and set it on the small table between them. I have an app here that shows the energy output from the test units we've installed in Detroit, just a few blocks from where I grew up. These families are saving an average of 62% on their energy bills. That's real money that can go toward groceries, medicine, education, things that matter. The studio lights no longer felt hot to Andrew. He was fully in his element now, talking about the work that drove him, the purpose behind the profits. One homeowner, a retired bus driver, told me last month that his solar panels meant he could finally afford to visit his grandchildren in Florida. That's what success looks like to me, not just numbers on a balance sheet, but real impact on real lives. Cameron nodded, his expression transformed. The antagonism had faded, replaced by what appeared to be genuine interest. That's a perspective we don't often hear in business discussions, he admitted. Andrew nodded. Because business isn't just about making money. At least it shouldn't be. It's about solving problems and creating value. The best companies do both. He glanced at his watch, aware that they'd gone well over their allotted time. I think we might be running long, he said with a smile. Cameron looked at his producer, who was frantically signaling to continue. We've adjusted the schedule, Cameron said. This conversation matters. Can you tell our viewers more about how this technology actually works? In simple terms? And just like that, the interview shifted. The ambush had been diffused without anger or accusation. Andrew hadn't called out Cameron's inappropriate questions directly. He'd simply refused to engage with them and redirected the conversation toward what truly mattered. For the next several minutes, Andrew explained how their solar technology worked, using analogies that made complex engineering concepts accessible to anyone watching. He spoke about their manufacturing process, their commitment to sustainable practices, and their goal of making renewable energy a reality for communities typically left behind in technological advances. By the time the segment finally ended, Cameron was leaning forward, fully engaged, asking thoughtful questions about implementation and scalability. The final image viewers saw before the commercial break was the two men shaking hands. Cameron's expression respectful, Andrew's confident and composed. In the green room afterward, Andrew's phone lit up with messages. The first was from his mother. That's my boy. Always taking the high road. Andrew barely had time to loosen his tie before Philip burst into the green room, eyes wide with excitement. My phone is exploding, Philip said, holding up his device. Absolutely exploding. Andrew took a sip of water. The interview had left his mouth dry. Good or bad? Good, incredibly good. Philip scrolled through his notifications. Social media is going crazy. People are sharing clips already. Everyone's talking about how you handled PS. One of the production assistants knocked on the doorframe. Mr. Wilson, the executive producer would like to speak with you, if you have a minute. Andrew nodded, straightening his tie again. As he followed the assistant down the hallway, he checked his own phone. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of notifications. A text from Tanya at the office. Boss, you're trending EVL. The executive producer, a woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, was waiting in a small office filled with monitors. Each screen showed a different news channel or social media feed. Andrew's face was on nearly all of them. Mr. Wilson, she said, extending her hand. I want to personally apologize for how that interview began. That was not what we had agreed to. Andrew accepted her handshake. No harm done. She gestured to the screens. Quite the opposite, it seems. I've been producing television for 27 years, and I've rarely seen a response like this. The clip of your story about your mother has been shared over 50,000 times in the last 40 minutes alone. On one of the monitors, Andrew saw the hashtag Andrew Wilson class trending. Another screen showed a news anchor saying, a masterclass in grace under pressure. We'd like to invite you back, the producer said. A full segment, no ambushes this time, just you talking about your company and your journey. Andrew nodded. I'd be happy to come back. But next time, let's focus on the technology. That's what matters. By the time Andrew's car pulled away from the studio, clips of the interview were playing on every major network. His phone rang. The CEO of PrimeSource, one of the largest retail chains in the country. Andrew, the CEO said without preamble, I just watched you on American Morning. I've been on the fence about carrying your solar home systems in our stores. Not anymore. Let's make it happen. How soon can your team meet with our purchasing department? In the back of the car, Andrew loosened his tie again and smiled. Sometimes, life had a way of turning obstacles into opportunities. Back at Ecotech headquarters, the staff had gathered in the main conference room to watch the interview together. When Andrew walked in, they erupted in applause. Tanya rushed forward with a tablet. These just came in, she said, showing him the screen. 6 major retailers want to carry solar home. 3 investment firms that previously passed on us now want meetings. And the governor's office called. They want to discuss a statewide green energy initiative with Ecotech as the primary partner. Andrew looked around at his team, engineers, marketers, accountants, administrative staff, people who had believed in his vision and worked tirelessly to make it real. Many had been with him since the early days when Ecotech operated out of a rented warehouse with second-hand furniture. "This isn't about me," he told them. "It's about what we've built together. Now let's get back to work. We've got a product to launch." Later that evening, Andrew sat alone in his office, watching the sunset through the large windows. On his desk, notifications continued to flood his devices. A major advertising firm had suspended their relationship with American Morning, citing concerns about the show's interviewing practices. Cameron Pierce had issued a carefully worded apology on social media, though it seemed more focused on saving face than expressing genuine remorse. Andrew's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Coming over with dinner. No arguments. Proud mama needs to feed her boy." He smiled and texted back, "Doors open. Love you." As he waited for her to arrive, Andrew thought about how quickly life could change. This morning, he'd been worried about the interview potentially hurting Ecotech's launch. Now, their visibility had skyrocketed in a way no planned marketing campaign could have achieved. His office phone rang, the private line that only a few people had the number for. "Mr. Wilson, this is Congressman Taylor's office. The congressman serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee. He watched your interview today and would like to invite you to testify at next month's hearing on renewable energy accessibility. He believes your perspective would be valuable to the committee." Andrew looked at the photo on his desk, his parents standing in front of their modest home, the first one with Ecotech solar panels installed. His father wouldn't live to see how far things would go, but he'd been there for the beginning. "Please tell the congressman I'd be honored," Andrew replied. As he hung up, he could hear his mother's voice in the outer office, charming the security guard who'd stayed late. Some things never changed, and some things changed in ways you could never predict. The interview that was meant to undermine him had instead created a platform bigger than he could have imagined. 6 months after the infamous interview, Andrew stood on a stage in his old Detroit neighborhood. Behind him was a renovated building that once housed an abandoned community center where he'd spent countless hours as a teenager. Now it gleamed with fresh paint, new windows, and solar panels that covered the entire roof. A crowd of people filled the chairs set up in front of the building: local families, Ecotech employees, city officials, and a group of teenagers wearing T-shirts with "Future Engineers" printed across the front. News cameras lined the back of the gathering. "Today," Andrew said into the microphone, "I'm proud to announce the launch of the Wilson Foundation with an initial commitment of $50 million dedicated to improving STEM education in communities nationwide." Applause rippled through the crowd. In the front row, Andrew's mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "We're starting right here," he continued, gesturing to the building behind him. "This center will provide free coding classes, engineering workshops, and technology access to young people in this community. The same community that shaped me." He paused, looking out at the teenagers in their matching shirts, the first participants in the program. "Someone once asked me how I managed to succeed despite my background," Andrew said, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "But I don't see it that way. I succeeded because of my background. Because growing up here taught me resilience. Because neighbors looked out for each other. Because my parents showed me that dignity and hard work matter more than circumstances." A murmur of agreement moved through the audience. "This isn't charity," he continued, his voice stronger now. "This is investment. An investment in talent that might otherwise be overlooked. An investment in minds that will solve problems we haven't even recognized yet." The sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the solar panels on the roof. They seemed to glow, a physical representation of the future Andrew was describing. Every community has brilliant young people who just need resources and opportunity. The Wilson Foundation is committed to finding them and supporting them, not just here in Detroit, but in neighborhoods across the country that have been underestimated for too long. More applause, louder this time. A local news reporter leaned toward her cameraman and whispered, "He's the real deal, isn't he?" After the ceremony, as people toured the new facility, Andrew's assistant approached him with a tablet. "You've got a visitor," she said quietly, nodding toward a man standing awkwardly near the refreshment table. "Cameron Pierce." Andrew hadn't seen or spoken to the talk show host since their interview 6 months earlier. After issuing his public apology, Pierce had taken a temporary leave from American Morning that eventually became permanent. His reputation had taken a significant hit, while Andrew's star had risen. "Thanks," Andrew said, handing his water bottle to his assistant. He walked across the room toward Pierce, who straightened up nervously when he saw Andrew approaching. "Thanks for coming," Andrew said, extending his hand. Pierce shook it, looking relieved. "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome." "It's a public event," Andrew replied with a small smile. "And an important one." The two men stepped outside, away from the crowd. Through the windows, they could see children exploring the computer lab, running their fingers over brand new equipment with expressions of wonder. "I've been doing some thinking," Pierce said, looking everywhere but at Andrew. "About my approach to journalism. About the assumptions I brought into our interview." Andrew nodded but remained silent, giving the man space to continue. "I started working with a media responsibility group," Pierce said. "We're developing guidelines for more ethical interviewing practices, and I've been pushing for more diversity in newsrooms, not just in front of the camera, but in the decision-making positions behind it." He finally met Andrew's eyes. "I wanted you to know that, and to apologize again, properly this time, face to face." Andrew studied him for a moment, taking in the genuine regret in the former host's expression. "You know," Andrew said finally, "my mother always taught me that how people respond to mistakes shows more about their character than the mistakes themselves." Pierce waited, seeming to hold his breath. "Sounds like you're responding well," Andrew concluded, offering his hand again. Relief washed over Pierce's face as they shook hands. "The first workshop at your foundation," Pierce said hesitantly. "It's in my hometown." Andrew nodded, seemed fitting somehow. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the neighborhood, Andrew found himself standing alone at the edge of the property. From here, he could see the street where he'd grown up, the corner store where he bought penny candy as a kid, the bus stop where he'd waited in the snow for transportation to his better-resourced high school across town. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Tanya. "CNN wants an interview about the foundation launch." Another message followed quickly. "Also, stock jumped 3% today. Board is thrilled." Andrew smiled, typing back, "Set up CNN for tomorrow. And tell the board the real work is just beginning." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and took a deep breath of the cool evening air. The infamous interview that could have been a setback had instead opened doors, creating opportunities not just for him or for Ecotech, but for countless young people who might otherwise have been overlooked. As he walked back toward the building, where his mother was waiting to drive home together, Andrew thought about how life worked in unexpected ways, how challenges could become platforms, how staying true to your values could speak louder than any defense. The lights of the new tech center glowed against the darkening sky, a beacon in the neighborhood, just the first of many. The real legacy wouldn't be about one man's success or one viral interview moment, but about all the lives that would be changed because of what came after.